I am staring at a map of Greenland right now, and I cannot stop thinking about what I just watched. Ken Harbaugh and Malcolm Nance, two Navy veterans who've dedicated their lives to understanding national security, are on the ground in Nuuk, Greenland, as capital city of 17,000 people. And they are not there on vacation. They are there because the people of Greenland are preparing for the possibility that America might invade them. Let me say that again slower. Our ally. A territory of Denmark, one of our oldest NATO partners. They re-stockpiling food and candles. They rechecking their hunting rifles. They remaking plans for 5 days off the grid because they think we might invade. How did we get here? And before anyone jumps down my throat, this is my analysis. I could be wrong about what I am about to lay out, but I've spent the last 3 days reading through hundreds of comments, watching this footage over and over, and I don't think I am wrong. I think something deeply disturbing is happening, and I think most Americans have no idea how serious this actually is. So stick with me, because what I'm going to show you isn't just about Greenland. It's about who we are becoming as a country and what we were willing to do in pursuit of power and money. Let's start with what we know for certain. President Trump has been talking about acquiring Greenland since his first term. Back then, most people laughed it off. The Prime Minister of Denmark called the idea absurd. Trump canceled a state visit in retaliation. It seemed like another bizarre Trump obsession that would fade away. But it didn't fade away. And now, in his second term, Trump is talking about it with a level of seriousness that should terrify anyone who cares about international law, democracy, and basic human decency. He is talking about an infinity framework, no time limit, total access. We'll be able to do whatever we want. Those are his words. Do whatever we want. Think about that language for a second. That's not the language of diplomacy. That's not the language of partnership. That's the language of conquest. That's the language of colonialism. And he is saying it about a territory that belongs to one of our closest allies, inhabited by 57,000 indigenous people who've lived there for thousands of years. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking about national security. You're thinking about China and Russia. You're thinking maybe Trump has a point about protecting Arctic interests. And look, I may not going to dismiss those concerns entirely. Arctic security is a real issue. China is making moves in the region. Russia has been increasingly aggressive. But here's what I need you to understand. There is already a framework for Arctic security. It is called NATO. Denmark is a NATO ally. Greenland is already protected by Article 5 of the NATO treaty. We already have a massive air base there, Pituffik Space Base, formerly known as Thule Air Base. We already have the strategic access we need. So why is Trump talking about acquisition? Why is he talking about doing whatever we want? Why is Malcolm Nance standing in front of a massive office building in downtown Nuuk explaining that the United States government has been trying to lease 50,000 square feet of office space for 100 staffers? Let me tell you what Malcolm discovered when he was there last year. The current American consulate in Greenland is 275 square feet. 275. It's basically a hut. It has 4 people working in it. 2 of them are local Greenlanders. That is our entire official presence in the biggest city in Greenland. But now they want 50,000 square feet for 100 staffers. Malcolm, who spent his career in intelligence, who understands how occupations work, looked at that building and said immediately, this is an occupation headquarters. And when you hear him walk through what that building would contain, it's chilling. Not just consular offices, not just an ambassador's chambers, but immigration and customs enforcement, naturalization services, Department of Commerce, a governor's headquarters, everything you would need to administratively control a territory. Malcolm said something that I cannot get out of my head. He said this would be the first command post of whatever military force they drop here. The first command post, not if they invade. Now, I want to be really careful here because I am making a big claim. I am suggesting that elements within the Trump administration are actively planning for the possibility of occupying Greenland. I don't have a classified briefing telling me this. What I have is 2 decorated veterans with extensive intelligence experience standing on the ground in Greenland, looking at the evidence and telling us what they see. And what they see looks like the groundwork for an occupation. Am I overreacting? Maybe. God, I hope so. But let me show you why I don't think I am. Let's talk about what happened at Davos. Trump went to the World Economic Forum and apparently had conversations about Greenland. We don't know exactly what was said. But multiple sources suggest that Trump believes he has some kind of deal or framework or understanding about Greenland. He came back talking about this infinity agreement, this idea that the United States would have total access and be able to do whatever we want. But here's the thing. The government of Greenland wasn't at Davos making deals. The Danish government wasn't there promising to hand over Greenland. Whoever Trump talked to, whatever was discussed, it didn't involve the actual people who would have to agree to any such arrangement, which means either Trump was lied to or he thinks he can bypass the actual democratic governments involved and just take what he wants. Malcolm made a point that really stuck with me. He said Trump has been conned by his own people, that whatever was promised at Davos has nothing to do with reality on the ground. And when Trump figures that out, when he realizes that Denmark and Greenland aren't just going to hand over sovereignty, his response isn't going to be, oh, well, never mind. His response is going to be escalation. We've already seen the psychological warfare. That's what Orla Jolin called it. Orla is a native Greenlander who works as a guide. He's a friend of the United States. He says Greenlanders have always been friends with America. But what Trump is doing right now, the threats, the bullying, the talk of acquisition, Orla called it psychological warfare against the people of Greenland. Think about what that means. This is how our allies now perceive us. Not as partners, not as protectors. As psychological warriors waging a campaign of intimidation against a population of 57,000 people whose only crime is living on land that Donald Trump wants. And the impact is real. When there was a power outage in Nuuk the other day, a routine outage caused by a weather event, the entire city went into panic. People thought it was the start of an American invasion. They thought we had knocked out the power grid as a prelude to airborne troops landing at the airport. I want you to imagine being an American in that moment. Ken Harbaugh said it was one of the most humiliating experiences he has ever had as an American, to be in a foreign country among people who used to respect and trust the United States and have them looking at you with fear, wondering if your country is about to invade theirs. Malcolm said that a year ago when he visited Greenland, there was enormous goodwill toward America. He was on national television, national radio. People celebrated him as a good American, connecting him to Matthew Henson, the African-American explorer who was one of the first people to reach the North Pole. Greenlanders saw him as representing the best of America. Now Malcolm says they hate us. And he didn't say it lightly. He said it with genuine pain in his voice, because he understands what we've lost. He understands that trust, once broken on this scale, takes generations to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. So why is this happening? Why is Donald Trump so obsessed with Greenland that he is willing to destroy our relationship with Denmark, terrify the Greenlandic people, and potentially violate international law? Let me tell you what I think. And this is opinion, this is my analysis based on the available evidence, but I believe it comes down to three things. Rare earth minerals, which are worth an estimated $8 trillion. Strategic control of Arctic shipping lanes as climate change opens new routes. And most importantly, the ability to claim a legacy achievement that cements Trump's place in history as someone who expanded American territory. The rare earth minerals are the key. Greenland sits on massive deposits of neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium. These are critical materials for electric vehicles, wind turbines, advanced electronics, military technology. Right now, China dominates the rare earth mineral market. Whoever controls Greenland's minerals could break that monopoly and make an absolute fortune. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Trump is surrounded by tech billionaires who need these materials. Elon Musk needs them for Tesla and SpaceX. Other billionaires need them for AI infrastructure, for semiconductor manufacturing, for data centers. One commenter pointed out that AI and semiconductor production require massive amounts of water for cooling. Greenland has abundant fresh water from melting ice. So you have $8 trillion in minerals, you have strategic Arctic access, you have the water resources that tech companies desperately need, and you have a population of only 57,000 people, many of whom live in remote communities that could be easily isolated or controlled. From a purely cynical, purely capitalistic perspective, Greenland looks like the ultimate prize. And if you are Donald Trump, surrounded by billionaires who helped get you elected, who are whispering in your ear about the riches buried under that ice, who are telling you that you could go down in history as the president who secured America's technological and economic dominance for the next century, why wouldn't you try to take it? Now, some of you are saying, okay, but Trump can just invade a NATO ally. That would trigger Article 5. That would mean war with Denmark, war with Europe, the end of NATO, complete international isolation. And you are right. A direct military invasion would be catastrophic, which is why I don't think that's the plan. At least not initially. I think the plan, and again, this is my analysis based on what Malcolm and Ken are reporting from the ground, I think the plan is a softer approach. Economic pressure. Political manipulation, installing that administrative infrastructure through the lease on that massive office building, bringing in 100 American officials, setting up immigration services, naturalization processes, business development offices. You create facts on the ground. You make it easier to do business with American companies than Danish companies. You start offering Greenlanders American passports, American benefits, American economic opportunities. You isolate the Danish government. You work directly with individual Greenlanders, with local communities, with business leaders. And maybe you engineer some kind of referendum, some kind of vote where Greenlanders are told they can have American prosperity or Danish austerity. American investment or European neglect. You frame it as a choice, as democracy, as self-determination, even though the choice is being manufactured through pressure and manipulation and economic coercion. And if that doesn't work, if Denmark and Greenland resist, then you escalate. You impose sanctions, you restrict trade, you make it economically painful to refuse American demands. And if that still doesn't work, then you start talking about security threats, Chinese influence, Russian aggression, the need for American military presence to protect against external threats, and suddenly you have troops on the ground, permanently, doing whatever they want. I know this sounds extreme. I know it sounds like I am describing a dystopian scenario that couldn't have possibly happened between democratic allies in the 21st century. But everything I just described has historical precedent. It's how empires operate. It's how powerful nations absorb weaker territories. The language changes, the justifications change, but the pattern is always the same. And the warning signs are all there. The psychological warfare that Orla described, the massive office building that Malcolm identified as an occupation headquarters, Trump's own words about doing whatever we want with no time limit, the panic in Nook when the power went out, the stockpiling of food and supplies, the 35,000 hunting rifles that Malcolm said are distributed across 57,000 people. Which brings me to something else Malcolm said that really stuck with me. He said, if there's resistance, if Greenlanders start shooting at American forces, we're going to be dealing with a population of snipers. These are people who hunt seals from bobbing boats at 200 meters, who take down caribou and muskox with long-distance precision rifles. These aren't TAR platforms. These are serious hunting weapons designed for long-range accuracy in brutal conditions. And he pointed out something crucial. Most of those rifles are in apartment buildings in downtown Nook, which means if American forces return fire, they're going to kill civilians. They're going to kill women and children and elderly people who have nothing to do with any resistance. And that's going to create an insurgency situation that could last for years. Do you understand how insane this is? We are talking about potential urban warfare in an Arctic city of 17,000 people. Our ally, a democratic territory. Because Donald Trump wants their minerals and his billionaire buddies want to build data centers, I'm going to be honest with you. This keeps me up at night because I see the pattern. I see the groundwork being laid. I see the propaganda being prepared. I see Trump testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push before someone pushes back. And I am not seeing enough pushback. Where is Congress? Where are the Republicans who claim to care about American values and international law? Where are the Democrats who should be screaming from the rooftops about this? Where is the media coverage commensurate with the severity of what's being contemplated? Some of you are probably thinking I am being hysterical, that Trump is just talking tough, that none of this will actually happen, that our democratic institutions will prevent any kind of colonial adventurism. And maybe you rewrite. God, I hope you rewrite. But I remember people saying the same thing about so many other Trump threats that eventually became reality. I remember people saying he would never actually ban Muslims. He would never actually separate children from their families at the border. He would never actually attempt to overturn an election. He would never actually bomb Venezuela and kidnap their leader. But he did all of those things because when you read dealing with someone who has no respect for norms, no respect for law, no respect for human dignity, the question isn't whether they'll do something extreme. The question is when and how much resistance they'll face when they try. And right now, the resistance is weak. Right now, Trump is getting away with threatening a NATO ally, terrifying 57,000 indigenous people, and laying the groundwork for what Malcolm Nance, a decorated intelligence professional, identifies as an occupation. So what do we do about this? First, we have to make this a bigger story. Right now, this is getting some coverage, but nowhere near what it deserves. The American people need to understand that their president is contemplating actions that would fundamentally change America's relationship with the democratic world. That would mark us as a colonial power willing to use military and economic force against allies to seize their resources. Second, we need to pressure Congress to act. There needs to be hearings. There needs to be legislation explicitly prohibiting any military action or coercive diplomacy against Greenland or Denmark. There needs to be a formal reaffirmation of our NATO commitments and a clear statement that Article 5 applies to Greenland. Third, we need to support the people of Greenland directly. We need to show them that Trump does not represent the will or the values of the American people. Ken and Malcolm are doing that right now by being there, by listening to Greenlanders, by reporting their stories with respect and dignity. But more Americans need to do the same. And fourth, we need to start thinking seriously about the long-term implications of what's happening. Because even if Trump doesn't succeed in acquiring Greenland, even if this whole scheme falls apart, the damage is already done. Denmark will never fully trust us again. Greenland will never see us the same way. Our other NATO allies are watching this and wondering if they are next. I keep coming back to what Orla said. We are allies. We have friends in the United States, and we will always have friends in the United States. But this threat from Trump needs to stop now. He is right. There are millions of Americans who are horrified by what Trump is doing, who understand that bullying and threatening our allies makes us weaker, not stronger, who believe in diplomacy and international law and respecting the sovereignty of other nations. But those millions of Americans need to be louder. We need to be more active. We need to make it politically impossible for Trump to continue down this path. Because here's what I believe, and this is my strongest conviction about all of this. If Trump gets away with Greenland, if he's able to use military pressure or economic coercion to force Denmark and Greenland to cede sovereignty, it won to stop there. Panama Canal next. Canadian provinces. Who knows what else? Once you establish that America can simply take what it wants from weaker allies, the entire international order collapses. And I know some of you are thinking, good, let it collapse. The international order has been unfair to America. We've been taken advantage of. It's time we put America first and stopped worrying about what other countries think. But I would ask you to consider what comes next. What does the world look like when there are no rules, when there are no alliances you can count on, when military might and economic power are the only things that matter? That world is less stable, not more stable. That world has more conflict, not less conflict. That world is more dangerous for everyone, including Americans. Look at how the world is already responding. I've been reading comments from people across Europe, from Canada, from Australia, and what I am seeing is a fundamental shift in how democratic nations view America, not just Trump, America. A commenter from Denmark wrote something that broke my heart. They talked about the nuclear waste the United States left behind at Camp Century, an abandoned Cold War base buried under the Greenland ice. That waste is going to pop out into the ocean in 20 to 30 years as the ice melts. And the United States has done nothing to clean it up, nothing to address the environmental catastrophe we created. And now we want to come back? Not to clean up our mess, not to make amends for past damage, but to extract $8 trillion in minerals? To build data centers that will consume massive amounts of water while the Greenlandic environment is already stressed by climate change? To impose American control over a people who never asked for it and donned to want it? The hypocrisy is staggering, and people around the world see it clearly, even if many Americans don tea. Another commenter from Germany made a comparison that chilled me. They referenced a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale called The Emperor's New Clothes. A story about a ruler so surrounded by sycophants that he believes obvious lies rather than his own perception of reality. Everyone around him is too afraid to tell him the truth until a child finally speaks up and shatters the illusion. That commenter suggested that Mark Carney's speech at Davos, where the Canadian Prime Minister candidate criticized Trump's approach, was that child's voice. The person willing to speak truth and break the spell of collective delusion. And I think there is something profound in that observation, because so many people around Trump are telling him what he wants to hear, that Greenland is attainable, that Denmark will cave to pressure, that 57,000 people can be bought or bullied into submission, that there were to be serious consequences for betraying our NATO allies. But reality doesn't care what Trump wants to believe, and the reality is that Denmark is a sovereign nation. Greenland is a self-governing territory with its own parliament and its own democratic will. The Greenlandic people have made it absolutely clear they are not interested in becoming American. And no amount of economic pressure or military intimidation is going to change that fundamental fact. Yet Trump keeps pushing. Why? Because he surrounded himself with people who profit from the pushing. Billionaires who see dollar signs in Greenlandic ice, military contractors who see opportunities in Arctic bases, politicians who see votes in nationalist expansion, media figures who see ratings in imperial swagger. None of these people have to live with the consequences if this goes wrong. None of them will be the ones fighting in Arctic snow if this turns into an insurgency. None of them will be the ones repairing America's shattered reputation for the next 50 years. They'll be safely insulated by their wealth and power while regular Americans, regular Greenlanders, regular Danes pay the price for their greed and ambition. I want to address something else that came up repeatedly in the comments I read. Multiple people asked why Congress isn't doing more. Why isn't Trump being impeached for what he did in Venezuela? For bombing a sovereign nation and kidnapping its leader without congressional authorization? Why isn't there more outrage, more action, more accountability? And you know what? Those are excellent questions. The Constitution is very clear. The president does not have unilateral authority to wage war. Congress has the sole power to declare war. Yet Trump ordered military action against Venezuela, an act that by any definition constitutes war without consulting Congress. That's a clear constitutional violation. But we've been down this road before. Trump was impeached twice. Both times, Republicans in the Senate refused to convict. They made a calculation that protecting Trump was more important than protecting the Constitution. And until that calculation changes, until there is a political price to pay for enabling Trump's lawlessness, he's going to keep pushing boundaries. Which brings me back to Greenland. If Trump can get away with bombing Venezuela, if he can get away with attempting to overturn an election, if he can get away with every other norm violation and constitutional breach, why wouldn't he think he can get away with this too? The answer is that he probably will think that, and he'll keep escalating until he hits real resistance. The question is whether that resistance comes from Congress, from the courts, from international pressure, from mass protests, or tragically, from armed conflict. I desperately want it to be one of the first options. I want our democratic institutions to function the way they are supposed to. I want the system of checks and balances to hold. I want Congress to pass legislation prohibiting any coercive action against Greenland. I want the courts to affirm that the president cannot unilaterally acquire foreign territory through military or economic pressure. But I'm also realistic about how broken our system has become, how partisan, how captured by special interests, how unwilling to confront executive overreach when it comes from their own party. So citizen action becomes even more critical. We cannot wait for institutions to save us. We have to save the institutions by making it politically impossible for politicians to ignore what is happening. And that means sustained pressure. Not just one protest and done. Not just one viral video and move on. Sustained, organized, strategic pressure until this madness stops. Let me paint you a picture of what success could look like. Imagine if millions of Americans contacted their representatives demanding action on Greenland. Imagine if there were coordinated protests in major cities. Imagine if veterans groups, which have enormous political influence, came out strongly against any military action toward NATO allies. Imagine if American businesses that trade with Europe made clear they would oppose any policies that damage transatlantic relationships. That kind of pressure could work. It could force Congress to act. It could make it politically toxic for Trump to continue down this path. It could show the people of Greenland and Denmark that Trump doesn't represent American values or the American people's will. On the other hand, let me paint you a picture of what failure looks like. It's Malcolm Nance's prediction coming true. American forces landing at that airport in Nuuk, moving into that 50,000 square foot occupation headquarters. Greenlanders resisting with those 35,000 rifles. Urban warfare in an Arctic city. Civilian casualties. An insurgency that lasts for years. Our NATO alliance shattered, Europe turning away from America toward its own defense arrangements, China and Russia exploiting the chaos to expand their own influence. And for what? For rare earth minerals, for bragging rights, for Trump's ego and his billionaire friends' bank accounts? That would be a catastrophic failure, not just of policy, but of values. A betrayal of everything America claims to stand for. Democracy, self-determination, rule of law, respect for allies, human rights. I refuse to accept that as inevitable. I refuse to believe that America has fallen so far that we would seriously contemplate colonial conquest in the 21st century. I refuse to give up on the possibility that enough Americans will wake up to what's happening and demand better. But refusal to accept isn't the same as confidence it won to happen. I am genuinely frightened by what I am seeing. By the casual way Trump talks about doing whatever we want, by the infrastructure being prepared for occupation, by the silence from too many people who should know better. This is one of those moments where history is watching, where the choices we make now will echo for generations, where we decide whether we are the America that stands with democracy and freedom or the America that crushes smaller nations to feed our appetite for resources and power. We built the post-World War II international order for a reason, because we learned through unimaginable bloodshed that a world without rules and norms and multilateral cooperation inevitably leads to catastrophic war. The system isn't perfect. It needs reform. But tearing it down through unilateral aggression against our own allies is not the answer. So I am going to keep watching what happens in Greenland. I am going to keep amplifying the voices of people like Ken Harbaugh and Malcolm Nance and Orla Jolin who are trying to show us what's really happening on the ground. I am going to keep pressuring my representatives in Congress to take this seriously, and I am going to keep hoping that I am wrong about where this is headed, that Trump's threats are just bluster, that cooler heads will prevail, that American democracy and our commitment to international law will hold firm. But I am also going to keep preparing for the possibility that I am right, that we rewatching the early stages of something that will shame our country for generations, that will mark us as a nation willing to betray its allies and terrorize indigenous populations in pursuit of profit and power, because that's what this is really about. It is not about security. It is not about protecting America from China and Russia. It is about $8 trillion in minerals and the billionaires who want to extract them. And if we let that happen, if we allow greed and imperial ambition to trump our values and our commitments, then we will have lost something far more valuable than any amount of rare earth minerals. We will have lost our moral authority. We will have lost the trust of the democratic world. We will have lost a piece of our national soul that we may never get back. So please share this video, talk about Greenland with your friends and family, call your senators and representatives, make some noise about this, because the people of Greenland are counting on us. Democracy is counting on us. And future generations who will have to live with the consequences of what we do or done to do right now are counting on us. I'll be following Ken and Malcolm S. reporting from Greenland closely. I'll update you as this situation develops. And I truly hope that the next update I give you is that Trump has backed down, that sanity has prevailed, that Greenland is safe and our alliance with Denmark is intact. But if that's not what happens, if this continues to escalate, then we need to be ready to fight back. Not with violence, not with the same authoritarian tactics that Trump uses, but with the truth, with moral clarity, with the courage to stand up and say that this is not who we are and this is not what America should be. Stay strong, stay informed,